Hello, everyone. Real quick before we dive into today's episode, I want to remind you that I'm now offering functional lab testing within my program in full function. I am so excited. This is about to completely transform so many lives, and I cannot wait. If you have been feeling off, whether that's stubborn bloating, fatigue that won't go away, difficulty losing weight, sleep issues, acid reflux, painful periods, mood swings, whatever the case might be, functional lab testing may be exactly what you need. This goes so much deeper than any traditional, conventional blood work. It helps to uncover hidden stressors like hormone imbalances, gut dysfunction, poor detox pathways, chronic stress patterns, and more. And it really allows us to better understand how is the body functioning and how is this dysfunction potentially contributing to the way I'm experiencing life, the way I'm feeling and how I'm functioning on a day-to-day basis. So, for a limited time, you can now book a free 45-minute consult to see if it's a fit. And because you are a podcast listener, I'm offering a special discount through the month of July so that you can take advantage of it at a discounted rate. All you have to do is schedule your free consult within the month of July, and you will receive $150 off my coaching package. So, super excited for this offer. Mention that you came from the podcast on our call, and you will immediately gain access to that discount. And we will talk all the details when we connect. Thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to supporting you. Welcome to Let's Eat. I'm your host, Emily, certified holistic health coach, functional nutrition expert, and self-proclaimed wellness enthusiast, here to meet you at the intersection of physical and mental health, the space within which we become well. This podcast is meant to explore all areas of mind and body wellness, designed to offer you the integrative knowledge, behavioral strategies, and mindset shifts necessary to uplevel your health and feel better today. We'll explore nutrition, sleep, movement, self-care and stress management, habits and routines, self-development, gut health, mental health, and more. I'm so happy that you're here. Welcome to the table. Let's eat. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Eat, and welcome to Functional Foundations. As I mentioned in episodes prior, through the month of July, I'm hosting a new series called Functional Foundations to give you the literal foundations of functional testing. I thought the alliteration there was clever. I wanted to do something with functional, something about like the basics of functional testing. And so coincidentally, or conveniently rather, we went with functional foundations. And we are going to be talking all month long about functional lab testing and getting more into the specifics of the tests and talking about some of the more common issues that women, especially, but men as well, can be navigating and common symptoms that we see and, talking a little bit deeper about the underlying dysfunction that might be there. I think this is going to be a really great tool for anyone who wants to, or rather, resource for anyone who has interest in testing and really wants to understand deeper the value and the benefit and why it differs from traditional healthcare and how the medical model differs from this particular approach. So, we're diving into lots of specific topics. Past episodes, I really just skimmed the surface essentially of my personal test results and talking about what markers we're looking at, but I'm going to dive deeper into each marker so you can have a robust understanding of what to expect and hopefully, utilize this as a way to determine or clarify, is this something that's right for me? Now, as I mentioned, there is a special going on through the month of July, so please feel free to take advantage of the discount associated with the podcast. This is something I'm going to be offering all month long. So I'm looking forward to supporting you if you decide to move forward with testing. And I can, of course, answer any questions that you might have. Details and all of the specifics are outlined in the show notes and will be in the show notes for the remainder of this month. So always feel free to refer to that if you need some clarification, as well as the link to schedule a consult. So let's dive in. Let's set the scene first and foremost. It is Sunday morning. I just got back with Talo. We went for a swim. And I intentionally brought her for a swim because in about an hour, I would like to go sit by the pool in my complex, which I don't do very often, but I'm going to bring my book and spend a few hours there. And I had too much mom guilt to not bring her somewhere first. So we swam for a little while. I think the biggest part of what tires her out is us getting there. Today was actually pretty successful. I really didn't have to carry her at all, and she is now almost asleep. We've been home for like 5 minutes, but it's about a half a mile, I would say, probably a little under a half a mile from my doorstep to get to this location that we go swimming. And I have been trying to get her to walk and, obviously get more comfortable on the leash, but really just walk the whole time, especially because this girl is getting heavy. All right. I think my days are numbered with picking her up. So this whole week, essentially, I'm just going to carry her everywhere so I can take advantage of it. But yeah, the trip there, and then we swim for, 20 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, not very long because she's ready to rock. She's like, all right, I've had enough. And she's also not yet learned how to retrieve. So it'd be fun. Like with Lou, I'd bring a tennis ball or I'd throw sticks and she'd be in and out, but Tallow doesn't really care yet. So that will be a work in progress because that might keep her entertained for a little while longer, but then we have to walk back. And this one stretch, I usually run both when we're going and when we're coming back just so that she's really letting out some energy. So that is my strategy so that I could go enjoy myself by the pool for a little while. I have some filtered water, lots of filtered water. I have a decaf cold brew with some organic whole milk and organic heavy cream. And then I also went grocery shopping this morning, so I got myself a Suja Uber Greens juice. If you are someone who's buying green juice, just as an aside, keep an eye on the sugar content. This is where things get a little tricky. We can see green juice and think it's a great option, which yes, love myself some green juice, but pay attention to how much sugar is in there. A lot of times with green juice, they try to mask the green flavor with apple or, some sort of mango or pineapple or whatever the case might be. And then we see that sugar content kind of creep up. So the Uber Greens is my favorite. Let me look. There are 8 grams of sugar. So it's the lowest sugar I would say of them all. So highly recommend if you're looking for some on the go green juice. But, anyways, today we're going to dive into gut health. And this is not going to be something where we talk about it and then we move on. There will literally be talks of gut health in every single episode over the course of this series because of its relevance and because of how important it is and because of how interconnected our gut is to our hormones, to our liver, to everything, our immune function. And so I want to be sure that that point is driven home over and over and over again. And I also want to be sure that I make it clear that gut health and gut dysfunction does not necessarily mean we all have to be experiencing some sort of digestive issue. Now, I think there's a couple different things I want to mention here. Like I just said, having gut dysfunction does not necessarily mean you have to have digestive distress or digestive issues. So, gut dysfunction can manifest in a number of different ways. Secondly, just because it's common doesn't make it normal. So I think, and this is coming from what I see, but also from what I know about being an American, 30-year-old female American and growing up in the culture and the society that I did. So this is coming both from my clinical experience, but also from just being a human being in 2025. We have just collectively decided that having irregularity or any kind of constipation, diarrhea, bloating, acid reflux, indigestion, cramping, whatever the case might be, any of the above symptoms, we've just decided that that is just normal. And I don't think we recognize how abnormal it is. And I'm speaking on this from even just within the past few weeks when inquiring about people's digestive concerns or about how regular they are or what their stools are like or how certain foods make them feel, right? And I think even with people sharing with me their experience in this, they don't even realize that what they're telling me is considered dysfunction because they're either just used to it or they just don't realize that it's not normal. They don't realize that, oh, I should be going more than just once a week, or I shouldn't have to run to the bathroom after eating all these, fill in the blank foods. I shouldn't feel bloated after eating, and that it's not just, oh, it's just the way it is, right? This is just how it goes. Or like we've just so collectively normalized these things. And I want to really shed light on how it takes that awareness to then say, this is something that I've found as normal for all these years of my life. And now I'm going to choose to look at it under a microscope so I can really understand where that's coming from. Because unfortunately, it's these many years of dysfunction, because we can call that dysfunction. Any symptoms, and we'll say, just for the sake of this conversation, we'll say digestive symptoms, we can write them off and live our lives for years and years and years in this space of distress. And it's not until 10 years, 15 years, 20 years down the line that progresses into something a little bit more severe, maybe, or maybe it's autoimmune or whatever the case may be. And we wonder where it came from. We wonder that, how this could have happened, or it feels like it happened overnight. But it's that progression, those subclinical symptoms, which I'll be using that word a lot. Subclinical meaning they're kind of that gray area where it's, the headaches or the stomach aches, or just not these like overtly, I cannot function with these symptoms, right? It's the ones we dismiss, the ones we take an Advil for, the ones we take a Tums for, the ones we just kind of carry on with life for. And that inflammation, that low grade inflammation that's likely there, is what's then going to progress to disease. And I want to say is, okay? I retract that statement because I think that's too black and white. That can progress to disease. So I challenge you first and foremost to do like a self audit and to think about, what is my experience? What do I feel like on a day-to-day basis? How is my energy waking up? For women, how are my cycles? Am I regular? Do I have painful cycles? How's my digestion? How is my energy throughout the day? How is my focus throughout the day? What have I noticed? Has anything changed within the past, say, 5 years, 1 year, 6 months? Paying closer attention is something I'm going to continue to reiterate throughout the entirety of this series, because that is a skill that we are simply not taught. And awareness is the key to self-transformation. So the more that we can be aware of the presence of these things, the more that we become detectives in understanding where the dysfunction lies. And that, coupled with functional lab testing and data, can help us really do that. So that is really the introduction I want to offer you. There's probably so much more, and I'm sure it's going to all come out in waves and and tangents in true Emily fashion. But for the sake of right now, there's a lot that I want you to take away from this series, because it's not just about the test, but it's also just that bird's eye view of understanding how this is so different than what we see in our traditional healthcare as Americans, why this is so valuable, why it can uncover some of these issues, why it might get you 100 times farther in your healing journey than what you get from a doctor. And essentially, taking that kind of time to look inward and say, okay, how does this fit into my life? How is this relevant to my symptoms, my circumstances? And is this something that I should pursue? Okay, so let's start by first talking about the gut. And why is the gut foundational? Now, the gut is not just about digestion. Hippocrates said all disease begins in the gut. I think I agree with that, and I think there's some people who say that's not the case, that there can be dysfunction elsewhere that then progresses to gut issues, gut dysfunction. So I think there is some truth to that, but I like to reiterate that whenever I'm teaching someone about gut health so that they understand, in a very simple way. This is not new, but it's not something that's technically often recognized within medical care. If it was, gastroenterology would be the most important specialty, because gut health is so key to whole body health. And so understanding that first and foremost creates that foundation before we can then understand endocrinology and neurology and all these other specialties within healthcare that all connect to the gut. Now, we know our healthcare system is very fragmented, so we don't have that kind of whole body approach. And obviously, we know that creates deficits and holes and failures in our system when we're not looking at the whole body and things are going overlooked. But for the sake of functional health, for the sake of functional testing, we look at the gut for a number of reasons. So the gut, like I said, is not just about digestion. It has about 70 to 80% of our immune system. It influences our neurotransmitter production. So that's going to directly impact our mood. We know there's a bidirectional relationship between the gut and the brain, otherwise known as the gut brain connection. I've talked about this before. There's other episodes on the podcast where I explore this. It also is responsible for nutrient production and nutrient absorption. So you aren't what you eat, you are what you absorb, is something I'd love to say, and you'll hear me say this again, that any kind of compromise in the digestive process means that if I'm eating something that's nutrient dense and healthful, wonderful, that's amazing and good for you, and continue to do that. However, if your body's not able to absorb it, then we're only getting a fraction of essentially what you're consuming. And every person's different. So, this can be dysfunction in a number of different areas, but keeping that in mind that, we can be eating all the quote unquote right things and still not being able to utilize it in the most optimal way. Gut health is also relevant to hormone balance and hormonal health. It's got a really strong relationship and important relationship with our liver. So, this kind of trifecta, the liver, the hormones, and the gut, these are areas we dive deep into, and we see how much of a relationship there is amidst the three. So much so that, when there's dysfunction in the liver, that can contribute to dysfunction in the gut, vice versa, gut health to hormone health. I mean, stress impacts all of these things, so it's all very interrelated. And so if you think about it through that lens, if you think about it through the sense of, all right, if I'm just going to an endocrinologist to get my hormones tested, or a gynecologist to get my hormones tested in the case of a woman, but I'm not considering the role of my liver and my gut, I'm only looking at a third of the picture. And that's generous because there's so many other things within the body that play a role in this kind of symphony of function in the body. And if we're not looking at the whole picture, then we're not only seeing only a portion of it, but then we can only get to like a small percentage of healing, if that's even possible, right? How are we going to actually heal something and address something if we don't know all of the moving parts that are existing there? So, super important. I'm sure have heard the term, maybe you haven't, leaky gut. This refers to intestinal permeability. So, this is essentially saying, is my gut lining compromised at all? We want an intact gut lining with these tight junctions remaining in place, tight, doing their thing. And if there's porousness there, permeability there, which can be a result of stress and toxins and pathogens and imbalances in our gut bacteria and so forth, this can make for a very inflammatory state because the body's now reactive to a lot of what's coming through the gut because it's leaching out into the bloodstream. And as a result of that, we find ourselves feeling not so good, and certain symptoms like brain fog and joint pain and food sensitivities, not to mention digestive issues, can result there. So then I did speak on imbalances in bacteria. This is referring to dysbiosis. So leaky gut and dysbiosis are going to be the two terms that I use to describe these two phenomenons. And dysbiosis is imbalance in our good and bad bacteria. Within the body, we have checks and balances throughout. We don't want too much good. We don't want too much bad. We want just right. Okay. Not too hot, not too cold, just right. So this can manifest in a number of different ways. This can manifest in a couple different hormonal ratios. This can manifest in our nervous system, our parasympathetic response, our sympathetic response. This can manifest in a number of ways, including the relationship between our good and bad bacteria. Now, on our GI map, which I'll talk about a little bit later on, we look at two different areas of bacteria, we'll say just as kind of like a general overview. And this include our good and bad bacteria. Now you'd say, oh, well, I don't want any bad bacteria. I want to get rid of that. But no, this is another one of those checks and balances. And we want a healthy amount of commensal good bacteria, and we want a healthy amount of opportunistic bacteria. This is essentially a way for the body to keep itself on its toes, that there's no, that it's not becoming complacent, and that it's able to kind of still act on stress in a healthy, productive way, right? So that's where we see dysbiosis when there's imbalances. Usually with leaky gut comes dysbiosis and vice versa. It's kind of like what came first, the chicken or the egg. That's not really important. What is important is knowing that it's there. And like I said, these issues can manifest beyond the digestive tract. It can look like fatigue, issues with skin health. This resonates with me and my past history with skin and having issues, cystic acne, hormonal acne, very painful acne. There's also an episode where I talk in depth about that experience. This can manifest as anxiety. I think more and more we're looking into the gut brain connection as it relates to mental health. It's still, I think, a little bit controversial because I think it's not discussed well enough within mental health care. And I think to some extent it might feel a little invalidating for people to say, like, oh, it's, what you're eating or whatever the case might be. But I do believe in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, this is going to be a massive pivot in the world of mental health in looking at that connection. This was something that I worked on as a therapist when I was working in private practice and focusing on this concept. Now, it brought a lot of challenge because, like I said, it's not something that's talked about enough. And I think the last thing people want to hear when I say, okay, let's look at your gut health. Number one, people don't just naturally make the connection between the gut and our anxiety. And like I said, people don't want to be told, well, it's the way you're living your life that's driving up these symptoms for you. And that's just the honest truth. I mean, I don't blame them. Of course, no one wants to feel that way. But at the end of the day, we have to look at the interconnectedness between our physical health and our mental health. It's not to say that all anxiety disorders are rooted in gut health. I'm not saying all depressive disorders are rooted in gut health. I do believe that there's a connection certainly there, if not, a pre-existing condition is exacerbated by our lifestyle choices, hands down. But I think more and more we're seeing how certain strains of bacteria and certain microbiome compositions are more susceptible to certain mental health concerns. And I think that is something that should not be overlooked. Nextly, irregular periods. Okay, issues with our cycle. Ladies, issues with their cycle. There's going to be a whole episode talking strictly on this. So I will reserve this rant for that. But issues within our GI tract can result in dysfunctional or uncomfortable cycles. Autoimmune flares, autoimmune and gut health, hugely intertwined. Joint pain, brain fog, the list goes on. So, what I think is something that I want to reiterate, essentially what I said before, is while the GI map, and we're going to get into what that is a tool that's used diagnostically for GI doctors. You can go to your GI doctor and typically request this test, or it might be recommended to you. What is not looked at is all the other elements of the picture. So, understanding how the other foundational areas of your health impact that picture, you're only getting a fraction of what needs to be seen in order to effectively address it. Now, when it comes to the GI map, the difference between the way that we use it as functional diagnostic practitioners versus a GI doctor, primary care doctor, whomever, is when we look at it as a non-diagnostic tool. And I say that intentionally because we as FDNs are not allowed to diagnose, right? I'm not a medical professional. I'm not here to diagnose. I'm here to use these tools to understand your body and the picture that it's painting for us to understand where the dysfunction and imbalances lie and where the healing opportunities are. So if we're looking at the GI map as a diagnostic tool, we might say, okay, there's presence of candida overgrowth, there's a parasite, there's H. pylori. So let's address the H. pylori with an antibiotic. Let's address the candida overgrowth with a low, or candida diet, where we're eating low this, low that. Let's address this by this and this by that, right? And looking at it more as like a pinpointing, let's address these individually. Now, as an FDN, we're not going to look at it in that way, right? We're going to look at it as like, let's look at the terrain of the gut. Let's use this tool to look at the microbiome as the landscape of your small intestine so that we can understand all of it in its entirety as opposed to honing in on one specific issue and letting that drive our focus, letting that drive our plan. Because what the reality is, I'm going to say this twice, the pathogen, the dysbiosis, the whatever the case is that comes up in your GI map is not the problem. It is the result of the problem. It's not the problem, it's the result of the problem. So it's not about the fact that there's a pathogen present and that's the problem. It's the fact that the body was not strong enough due to other dysfunction, due to other down-regulated systems due to stress that allowed that pathogen to make a home in your GI in the first place. So think about it through that lens. That is a dramatically different way to look at this concept. It's not about looking at the microbiome and pinpointing these issues. It's about looking at it at a bird's eye view and saying, okay, the body was compromised enough that X, Y, and Z could happen. So, how are we coming from underneath and bolstering up the body's ability to become more resilient, to manage stress better, to build up what we call in FDN the vital reserve in order to get rid of this issue? Because obviously we want to eradicate it, but also prevent it from happening again. So I hope you can understand the difference there. It's a powerful difference. And boy, is it eye-opening when you think about it through that lens. It's like, wait a second, that does make sense. Like, why would I just address the GI map in a way that's just so limited? Because yeah, obviously it would be wonderful to get rid of these issues, but if your body's still weakened and unable to protect itself or to function properly, if there's still issues underneath the surface in other areas of the body, then, you know, it's just going to recur and like come back, right? Like your body's not going to be able to fight against it. And so it's a new way of thinking, it's a different way of thinking, but it's a powerful way of seeing this testing modality as opposed to just something that we diagnose with, and it's more of like an opportunity to see the whole picture. So to break it down, let's get into the GI map. The GI map is a stool test. Okay, so it's a stool analysis that looks at bacteria. I just referred to it before as like your good and bad bacteria. It's going to look at yeast. It's going to look at parasites. It's going to look at viruses. It's going to look at other really, really valuable intestinal health markers that are going to tell us about inflammation. It's going to tell us about your body's response to gluten. It's going to tell you about some detoxification and digestion. It's going to tell us a whole bunch about a whole lot of things. Okay. We also get insight, like I said, into enzyme, production, fat breakdown, immune markers, and other, leaky gut markers that help us better understand the integrity of the gut lining and if there's gut, permeability present. Now, we couple this test with a few other tests, of course, but there's also a test called the mucosal barrier assessment where we have a really clear understanding of GI inflammation and intestinal permeability. So both of these together, the marriage of both of these is a really powerful duo. And so this test is, like I said before, it's going to help us understand not only what's there, but also how it's affecting the body's ability to function. And that second half of that sentence is what's different between the way GI doctors or primary care doctors look at this versus the way that we look at in a more functional space. Better understanding the body's function through the lens of this GI map can help us better clarify, okay, this is a good reading. This is one snapshot of what's going on in the digestive tract, and how can we use this supplementally to all these other tests in order to paint the whole picture of the body's functioning overall. Now, you might ask, why do we use stool instead of blood? Now, I was just talking to you about this with a client yesterday or not yesterday, a couple days ago. And I really do think that stool and fecal analysis is going to be something that we do more and more and more of as we move further in healthcare, which maybe will take some time. But there is a lot of emerging research about the value of fecal transplants and how, I'm pretty sure there was a study that did some research on diabetic mice, and either they took the feces, the bacteria of non-diabetic mice and put it in diabetic mice, or vice versa. And whatever the outcome was, it was either the non-diabetic mice became diabetic or the diabetic mice become non-diabetic. I forget exactly what it was, and I probably shouldn't be speaking on this until I have like actual like a full-blown resource, but basically there's value. Basically, we know our gut bacteria modulates so much of who we are. And I say that without exaggeration. We are more bacteria than we are human. So remember that. We have more bacteria than we do cells, and this is huge. So by being able to transplant certain bacteria into another human, that can incredibly impact our mental and our physical health and create profound change. And so I really do believe that this is the future. Fecal transplants, who would have thought? But stool testing gives us that direct view of what's happening in the gut environment. So this is more hands-on versus blood work, but that's just going to show us the downstream effects of dysfunction. The stool is going to be able to show us the source. So you might have normal blood markers, right? But you could still have pathogens, dysbiosis, inflammation in the gut, right? And this may have not reached that kind of systemic level yet. So we're looking more specifically in the GI using stool because it's going to give us the best picture. So that's why we do that. So we're going to dive into a few of the markers on the GI map that are important, but I want to just revisit the importance of the gut and just really emphasize why I think every single person should have their gut tested. I think every single person should have their gut tested. I think this should be, with how important it is, I think we should be doing this routinely at every annual visit. We should be talking about our gut health with every single one of our doctors. That is how important. Like I could just say that and end this episode, and that would be it, because that's how I feel. There's just That's just the way it is, how important it is. There's just no denying it. And we're just not doing a good job at this at all. I mean, at the end of the day, our gut is where our body decides what to absorb and what to eliminate, okay? So this is essentially key for proper nourishment and protecting the body. As I said before, if our gut lining is compromised, this can allow, particles and pathogens and toxins to move into the bloodstream. And this can promote immune dysregulation and widespread inflammation. Imbalances in our GI and our, microbiome can result in a ton of dysfunction, both GI and non-GI related. And having a healthy gut is key for blood sugar, for clearing out endogenous hormones. So, just breaking down and eliminating hormones that are produced within the body, and the nervous system. I didn't even talk about the nervous system. Our digestion and our nervous system go hand in hand. So really understanding the value, and I know I sound like a broken record, but I really want to put out there how important this is. So when we're looking at the GI map, I'll give you kind of a broad overview, and I want to just specifically talk about a few. So the commensal or beneficial bacteria are our good bacteria. And we want this community of bacteria, we want them to be thriving, okay? We want them to be rocking and rolling and all happy. We don't want them necessarily at, war with each other. We don't want them to be too high where there's some that are dominating over the other, but we want a healthy balance amidst this community of bacteria. And we can look at this bacteria as being kind of like the prominent figures in our community. So a fire chief, or the mayor, or the, I don't know, what are some other people? Like the police, the chief of police, the school principal, right? Like we wouldn't want any one of these humans having too much power or being too much in control, but we want them all to be thriving. It's a symbiotic relationship, okay? But in a lot of cases, this community can be depleted. And you can imagine what happens if we don't have a fire chief, we don't have a chief of police, we don't have a principal, we don't have, these important figures within the community. Things can get out of hand. Okay. Then we also have the opportunistic and or pathogenic bacteria. And this is a number of different types of bacteria that I said keep everyone in check. Now, we don't want too much of this. We want a healthy balance of this in relation to the commensal bacteria. And that's where we see a symbiotic relationship amidst the two. Overgrowth of any opportunistic bacteria can result in lots of digestive distress and symptoms. And obviously, overall, it's a dysbiotic situation. Then we can also have yeast and fungal overgrowth. Sometimes when it comes to these issues, we don't see outward symptoms necessarily, but there's still the presence of these issues. And that's still promoting low-grade inflammation because obviously it's not meant to be, they're not meant to be living in our GI. I don't think anyone wants these things to be happening, any overgrowths to be happening, presence of parasites, none of that. So any of these issues too, any presence of parasites, viruses, yeast, fungi, you name it, whatever the case is, they can all go undetected through traditional lab work because we're not looking at the stool. And if there's no overt symptom, say something like if you had C. diff, for example, that is probably something that you would know about because you could feel very unwell. You could be violently ill as a result of something like that versus having something like a parasite or, like I said, overgrowth, and it might present in symptomology, but not once are you like, well, maybe I have this or maybe I have that. For example, candida overgrowth can present as extreme sugar cravings, or if eating sugar, you can feel bloated. But you're not going to immediately think, oh, this is candida. And we're also, maybe the GI doctor will test for something of that capacity, right? Depending on what they offer and what they suggest. But you might chalk up your sugar cravings to just being a lack of self-control or feeling like I just can't control myself around sugar and this is just how it's going to be. And there could actually be something going on within our GI that's causing that, as a result. We also look at digestive function markers. So we're going to look at steatocrit, and that's going to tell us, is there any fat in the stool? And if there is, we know our body's not digesting fat properly. And then elastase as well. Anything with ASE is an enzyme, and this is going to help us better understand how our body's breaking down protein. So steatocrit alongside elastase gives us a pretty solid picture of overall digestion, right? If our body's compromised with their enzyme output, sometimes called enzyme insufficiency. There's a couple different names that can be used here. That's going to then speak to that concept that I said before of it's not what you eat, it's what you absorb, right? And like being able to understand, I could be eating all the good stuff, but if my body doesn't have the tools to break it down and utilize it properly, not to mention if I have a compromised gut lining or I have dysbiosis or whatever the case may be, then they're not able to your body's not able to utilize the food at its greatest, in its greatest potential. We look at a marker card called secretory IgA, and this is going to tell us about your immune function. Everyone wants to know about our immune health, right? Everyone wants to boost immune health. Everyone wants to avoid sickness, prevent illness, and we're not looking at the gut enough in order to do this. Now, we also look at secretory IgA through a saliva test. So it's cool because we're able to see it through stool and saliva, and there can be differences and discrepancies between the two because we're looking at them at two different areas of the body. But the SIG-A acts as kind of like a bouncer. And it's at this mucosal barrier, and it's deciding who is coming into the bar and who needs to be out. So that's a pretty big responsibility, especially when it comes to this area of our health, because our GI lining and our gut is so important in the digestive process and in keeping ourselves safe and healthy and so on. So understanding your secretory IgA to be sure that it's where it needs to be in order to respond effectively to threats. We also are going to look at a marker that is called beta glucuronidase, and this is exceptionally important to understanding one's hormones, to understanding the liver. We're also going to look at a marker called zonulin. This is not on the GI map. It can be tacked onto the GI map, but we're going to look at this on another test. And this is all about your mucosal barrier and do I have leaky gut? And we're also going to look at, so all of these markers paint the picture. That's really the takeaway here. Each individual marker serves a purpose, and we're able to take these markers together and then alongside the ones we'll see in the other tests and really get a full understanding of what is going on within the body, where the dysfunction lies, and where are the healing opportunities for us to address in order for you to feel better. That is obviously the ultimate goal. Now, when it comes to gut health, I'm just going to say it again because I keep saying it. It can easily be overtly digestive symptoms. And I want to be sure I make it clear that the symptoms that you might be dismissing as just a part of being a woman, or this is just what happens. I've dealt with this for many years, or whatever the case might be, whatever that looks like. This is your body's way of communicating with you that there is something awry and that your body isn't functioning the way that it should. Digestion is a massive, massive process. Massive. I mean, it involves, the brain, it involves obviously your mouth, it involves many organs of the body. It is huge, and any level of dysfunction that might be present there isn't an isolated issue. It's going to then present dysfunction otherwise. And what honestly, aside from, metabolism, right? Like what an energy production, what is more important than our digestion? If we're not able to take in nutrition from the foods that we're eating, we won't survive. And obviously that's like an extreme example, but that's essentially what's happening is we're not able to utilize the nutrition that we're eating if we're eating it, and that's leading to malfunctioning across the board. So looking at these markers and understanding this is essential for mind body health. There's no doubt about it, and to the overall functioning of the body. And the GI map alongside the mucosal barrier, and then obviously a few of the other foundational tests can give us a really powerful picture that we can then utilize in your journey, in your healing. And that's what's most important, is being able to take all the information that we can and put it together with your specific circumstances, what you've experiencing, what your history looks like, and be able to formulate a really solid understanding of why this dysfunction's happening. Now, the goal is not always to get to the root cause. That I think is a misconception. The root cause is obviously valuable, but sometimes the root cause is unknown, and that's okay. At least we can see where the dysfunction's happening, and it's not necessarily pertinent for us to say, well, what came first or what was causing this? If it's all clear to us dysfunctionally, then we can just address each individual area and be able to feel better as a result of that. It's not pressing that we determine exactly what the root cause was. Instead, we have all the information we need to address it fully and comprehensively, and that's going to generate results. So, to wrap up, I want to kind of talk a little bit about what we might do with some of the results that we see. Just as kind of a general, this is typically what the protocol or roadmap might look like. So, for something like an overgrowth or a parasite or something of that nature, we probably go through an eradication process. Now, there's always the option for someone to seek out medical support in addressing this. Obviously, everything, that we do and how we approach it is going to be from like an herbal perspective. Obviously, no medication is involved, but it is meant to eradicate the pathogen that is present. Now, at the same time, we also want to bolster the body's ability to manage stress and respond more effectively to stress, because a pathogen is in fact an internal stressor. And then also we want to support our detox pathway so that the body can effectively eliminate the pathogen and remove it from the body. So that includes a couple different types of lifestyle and supplemental suggestions, we'll say. We also might introduce a probiotic based on what your bacteria looks like, based on if it's relevant, if it's necessary to restore balance. We will also talk potentially about digestive enzymes or bile support to help improve absorption, especially in the interim while we work on, all right, why is it that my body's not producing adequate enzymes? And can I, use something in the meantime? I love my digestive enzymes. I love my digestive enzymes. I'm such a proponent for digestive enzymes. So incorporating something like that to help the digestion process, the absorption process. We would likely talk about nutrition to repair the gut lining, because if you have any kind of leaky gut, we need to address that, reinforce that. And then also just specific lifestyle shifts to help support overall gut health down the line. The goal is not to remain on all of these supplements forever. That is not the point. The point is to get you to a place where your body is healed, and now we want to maintain that healing. We want to be sure that everything that you're doing over the course of your day is considerate of the fact that I don't want to get back to where I was, and I need to change my lifestyle on a daily basis in order to keep up with the plan. Right? Like that's ultimately what it is. The goal is not to be on the supplements forever. Like I said, the goal is to heal. Some of them can be long term, and that's cool too. And obviously, as a practitioner, I'll make it known to you which you need to stay on for X amount of time versus ones you can stay on longer, or whatever the case might be. But it's a very customized, very personalized, very comprehensive plan that is put into place, supplementation wise and lifestyle wise, based on your lab data and your current lifestyle choices. Because obviously, your current lifestyle choices will probably need to be adjusted given the fact that you now have a completely new understanding of your health. So I'm hopeful that this episode helped you better understand a little bit about gut health and the GI map and what essentially we're looking at. The gut is so incredibly important to our overall health, and there can be a lot going on in our gut, and we might not even know it. We might not even be aware of it. We might not be symptomatic. And so that's why I feel like these types of tests are so important on like a regular basis, at least annually. Now, that's not plausible for everyone, so that's just ideal ideal world thinking, but I just find there to be so much importance to it. I mean, I did a test similar to the GI map last spring, and I had no issues as far as H. pylori or pathogens, parasites, and so forth. And then I just tested my GI a couple weeks ago, and I have all these things going on now. And so just goes to show that a lot can change, and you might not even realize that it's happening. And so just keeping up with that as a regular practice, as a regular kind of health hygiene tool, I think can be really, really important. So, in upcoming episodes, we are going to build on a lot of this and interrelate a lot of it. So, you'll be hearing me reference the GI map in other episodes. We'll be talking about the gut in other episodes and its relevance to some of the other tests. So, I'm really excited for the series. I think it's going to be really great to give you a little bit more of a solid foundation to stand on as it relates to testing. Certainly, much more information than what I could offer you in a 45-minute consult. But please remember that the discount for functional testing is available through the month of July. Further details are listed in the show notes. And if you have questions for me, please let me know. But I'm super excited. And this is just such a wonderful start to a new series. And I hope that it brings you so much value. If you've been curious about testing, this is your sign. This is your sign. And I will leave a question box at the bottom for you if you have questions for me about the episode, or if you have questions about any of the above topics that were covered today, or if you have questions specifically about gut health, please let me know or DM me on Instagram. But I look forward to these next few weeks. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to the series. So I hope you are too. And until next time, be well.